I'm Societas Eruditorum, and I'm going to be talking about my Armored plus P runs at Woodland Brutality 2024. I was running an Armored plus P, though as I have recently graduated with my doctorate, I renamed it Armored plus PhD and was competing in my full graduation regalia. For firearms, I chose to use a 3D printed Steyr AUG, a 1911 pistol, and my doctoral sword, an 1860s U.S. cavalry saber.
Are you ready?
The first stage competed on was the Tunnel Rat stage, where one engaged steel targets from a variety of positions after stepping over and under stepping over tripwires or underneath these tunnels made of sticks. This was not a great stage for me to start out with. I'm not very familiar with the 1911 as a platform, and overall, my shooting was generally subpar. Here you will see one of the advantages of a bullpup rifle, where it was very easy for me to keep the muzzle out of the mud and muck while crawling underneath these barricades, despite having to control a 3-foot long sword and keep that from also hitting the sticks that were overhead.
Probably. I don't know though. The AK matches are usually so like, although they're trying to make it more challenging this year, but like they're usually so.
Throughout the match, you'll see me try to retain my pistol magazines, as it was very muddy at Woodland this year, and I feared that if I let mud get into notoriously unreliable 1911 magazines, my runs would be even worse than if I had a functioning firearm.
I told the other guys it's the case, and then I heard the bang, so I figured he was back.
The spinner started reasonably well, however, I quickly dumpster fired my way out of ammunition, and thinking I had got the required 12 hits, 6 on top, 6 on bottom, I moved on from the spinner. However, I apparently had only gotten 11 hits, and so received a major penalty for both failing to engage the spinner and failing to spin it completely.
Leaving it. Okay. What is that? The 30? You want high value? HK, right? Yeah, it's USD. I'm old school. Keep going, keep going.
I will say, I felt like I definitely noticed the 150s.
Yeah. And it turns out when you don't miss, then spinners.
I was being very careful not to let the sword knock any of the sticks off of the tunnels, as each stick knocked off was a 60-second penalty. However, I probably could have crawled a little bit faster, and made up some of the time I sacrificed by being a terrible shot.
Makes very bittersweet.
Get ready, stand by.
The next full stage we went to was the March to Mingo, which was a long-range stage featuring hits out to 380 yards, and this was yet another pretty tragic failure of a stage. The Nylog retained zero relatively well, or at least it did during my initial test firing. But as the trunnion began to absorb water from the change in humidity from my native New Mexico to the area of Woodland, the zero began to shift. I also suffered a very significant jam there, with a brass case getting stuck over the guide rod and preventing the gun from returning to battery. I would suffer that one more time later on in the match, which I'm attributing to it bouncing off of my DIY brass deflector and hitting back into the
Next position.
chamber. However, once the barrel had warmed up a little bit and kind of normalized with the printed trunnion holder, my zero became a little more stable, and so I was able to more successfully make some of these longer range hits. However, I had burned too much time and was not able to finish this stage.
Sling the rifle, move the barrel.
Nothing to do with it, but now it's super sick with it, so. I do exactly the same thing.
Good. Load the rifle.
Throughout the match, you will see me hesitating to go down into prone, or at least going down slower than I might otherwise be able to. The presence of the sword made diving into prone a much harder proposition, as if I dived incorrectly, the hilt would ram directly into my crotch and be deeply uncomfortable. So my transitions from prone to standing and standing to prone were limited by the hardware I decided to attach to my belt.
Low. Right edge. Low right. Drop mag. Muzzle. Bonus. Sling it. Load, Mr. Jingles.
At this point, the zero had started to stabilize, but I wasn't very confident in it, and so you'll see that at the next stage, I'm continuing to search for a zero, which isn't shifting anymore, and so I'm going to spend a lot of time shooting around the targets when I've got a pretty fixed point of impact.
Load the rifle. That sounded better. Dancing. Low. Low. Left edge. Low, one target. No call.
And so I'll make my final hit here and begin to transition to the pistol portion of the stage, but I am too late.
Finish off the steel. Time. Unload, show clear.
The next stage was the War Never Changes stage, and this was definitely my best stage of the entire match, as the confined spaces really did suit the bullpup pretty well, and the sword didn't get in my way. As I engage the targets through these ports, you'll kind of see me get a little more used to how much gas is being blown out of the muzzle of the AUG, which does not have a sealed bottom of the muzzle device. And so here, I mag dump quickly in 2 shots into this paper target, but that throws up enough dust I'm unable to find the steel for a couple seconds. The bullpup is really good at one-handed shooting, and made engaging those papers pretty trivially easy. Here we'll see the infamous reliability of the 1911 platform come into play as I get 2 jams over the course of this very short string of fire. One at the very beginning and one on my final shot.
I was like, should the flag go?
The next stage, the Forrest Gump stage, started with suppressing fire as you transition from the start point to your first piece of cover. And I made a mistake of trying to hedge my bets here, where instead of just sprinting to cover and popping off 5 shots rapidly, or staying static and actually hitting the targets downrange, which would have reduced my pistol shooting later on, I hedged my bets and kind of slow crawled while trying to make hits while moving, which resulted in a slower time and also not hitting anything on the move.
2 hits, I need the static steel. Drop mag, high value shot. Grab your rifle. Grab Bubba, drag him back into the tree line.
And here we see the really only time during the entire match where the sword significantly impeded my progress, getting stuck on those 2 trees, probably slowing me down by a second or 2.
Draw your pistol, give me 3 hits on the static steel.
Despite the RO's loud admonishment to get 3 hits on each steel, I completely forgot, and only did 2 hits on each steel initially, so I had to go back and get 1 additional hit on each steel. Unfortunately, using a 1911 meant that I had very limited mag capacity, and had to reload during this walk in order to deliver the suppressing fire requirement of this position. Also, the gun jammed once again. Overall, the pistol shooting here was more difficult than it should have been. Shooting irons from prone is something I'm not very good at, but I managed to power through and complete the stage. Here you see a failure of gear layout, where I had put an 8-round magazine in my rear magazine pouch, specifically for these prone reloads, but that 8-round magazine is largely flush with the top of the pouch, and so I was unable to grab it effectively, and just transitioned to grabbing one of the magazines I had stashed on the front of my battle belt. The final stage, which I have video for, is the other long-range stage, Three-Court Manor. This involved a lot more running than the other stage, which is a bit of a challenge as the sword will get caught up in my legs. However, I was able to pretty effectively control both the bullpup and the sword without having any issue sprinting down to targets. However, my pistol shooting once again lets me down here. This should have been a relatively easy engagement with the Y-swinger. However, I waste a lot of time and bullets and end up having to do a reload here, which is not great from a time perspective. Also, more 1911 jams.
Drop magazine! 1!
I take a long time to get started shooting here, as the Nylog does have a little issue picking up the first round on a fully loaded magazine if you don't get a full rack of the charging handle, which I evidently did not from this position. However, by this point, I'd gotten a much better idea of my long-range zero, and though my trigger control definitely needs improvement, I did not feel as if the gun was undermining my shooting, just my shooting was undermining my performance.
position!
Here I had to resist the urge to draw the sword and issue a battle cry, as that would have made it difficult to attempt to reload on the move, and even then I did almost trip over the sword while reloading. Having now advanced close to 200 yards, the shooting got a lot easier, and I was much more quickly able to clear the required target engagements. However, I got into my own head, and there was a final bonus target that had to be shot from an with no magazine. You only had one hit shot, and I flubbed it completely. Overall, I had a fantastic time at Woodland Brutality 2024. The Armored plus PhD LARP was a lot of fun. It did pretty severely undermine my performance. I feel as if I could have done much better if I'd been using fully modern gear that I was very comfortable with. However, I had a lot of fun shooting with Squad 207, and as usual for Brutality matches, the ROs were fantastic, the stage designs were awesome, and I'm definitely looking forward to coming back next year, though I will probably be running some kind of AR-15 and double stack 9mm to try to redeem my placement.